Hey everyone, I'm super excited to have John Holbrook here. He is the president of Philippine Frontier Missions, and he's a dedicated missionary in the Philippines. He's been there since he's 8 years old, and he has incredible stories about reaching tribes that for 400 years they tried to reach these tribes, and they were able to make headway, and they started 4 churches that have now become 47 churches. So John, we are so excited to hear about what the Lord is doing in the Philippines. Give me just a little bit of background about you.
Yeah, so like you mentioned, I grew up really in the mission field. When I was 8 years old in 1994, my family joined Adventist Frontier Missions, and they asked us to go to this very remote tribe on the island of Mindoro. They're commonly known as the Mangyan. It's actually 8 different tribes, but kind of collectively they're known as the Mangyan. And like you mentioned, for 400 years, different missionaries from different denominations and places around the world have been trying to reach these people. But because of centuries really of cultural conflict and abuse, there was the Spanish occupation, there's the Japanese during World War II, all of these things that happened, they just really had a distrust of anybody and anything from the outside. And nobody had taken the time to really live with them, learn their language, overcome those barriers, demonstrate Christ's love, gain their trust. And so that's something really that AFM specializes in. And now Philippine Frontier Missions does the same thing. We're a sister organization. And so we moved into their village. We lived with them. We were the first ever to learn their language. Like to this day, I'm the only person actually that speaks their language outside of their own tribe. Wow. It took years of living with them before they trusted us enough to tell us their history and tell us their culture and their understanding, actually. They actually knew God before we ever came, but because of their original sin, they thought that God had abandoned them and didn't want to have anything to do with them anymore. So by God's grace and taking the time really to live with them, gain their trust, we were able to plant 4 churches. Now at AFM and now Philippine Frontier Missions, the same where I lead PFM, we don't just try to get people to be baptized. We really believe in full discipleship, just like Jesus did. He took the time, he invested deeply in training and leading people until they became disciple makers and disciple multipliers, really.
Wow.
So we disciple people to conversion, and we continue discipling them until they become missionaries and take over really our work. So yes, when they actually became better missionaries, they were becoming more effective than I was, I left the project. We went into what we call phase out. So we don't just abandon them, we don't just drop them, but we don't want them to become dependent on us. So I moved away from the village and took over the leadership of Philippine Frontier Missions as my assignment with AFM, training other people around the Philippines to do the same. But it was at this time when really it took off and they started multiplying, started growing incredibly quickly. And yes, like you mentioned, the 4 churches that we planted, the leaders that we trained there, they now have multiplied to 47 churches in 5 different tribes, native tribes there, with 4 going on 5 generations of churches. And we're not talking about biological generations here. I mean that the mother churches planted daughter churches. And then we were still with them, helping them as they trained the daughter churches to do what we had done and plant granddaughter churches. And that's really where the rubber meets the road, because we're no longer involved there in the 3rd generation church. And that's when you test if the DNA in the 1st generation was really, really solidly grounded in the Bible and the God's Spirit. And yes, so now the 3rd generation has planted 4th generation churches and are now planting their very first 5th generation church. They've even sent missionaries now from the tribes to other places, other unreached tribes in the Philippines.
Wow.
So from they were pretty much in the Stone Age still when we arrived, all the way from that to this now, kind of for them, international kind of missions.
And what do you mean by the Stone Age?
Well, when we arrived, they had machetes and they had aluminum pots. That was the only technology that they had when we arrived. Other than that, they were still hunter-gatherers in the jungle. Yeah.
Wow. I had the privilege of going to the Philippines maybe 2-3 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's probably one of the most beautiful places. I tell people, think of the most gorgeous tropical island that you could imagine. That's what the Philippines looks like, but it's, I believe, 4,000 islands.
7,000.
7,000 islands. So it's easy to see how these tribes could really be isolated.
Yes. very much so. And you know, when immigrants moved onto the island, they were pushed up into the mountains, very, very, very rugged mountains. So yeah, they live very isolated lives up there.
So what do you think your secret that maybe other churches can apply to, is it that you really didn't just baptize them and leave, but you really spent the time to disciple them on what it truly means to be a Christian? What do you think the secret is to this kind of exponential growth? You know?
Yeah. Well, there's not just one quick solution to that, but really the one thing I can say is go back to the New Testament. Go back and study how Jesus did his mission, how the apostles did their mission. We have, Adventists are very, the Tagalog word is masipag. What's that in English? Like industrious, hardworking at evangelism. It's not that we're lazy about evangelism, but we've started to try to hurry things along, and we started to kind of shorten discipleship and evangelism into shorter and shorter periods of time. And there are people that can be reached that way. But the majority of people that can be reached that way have been reached that way. And the 3.4 billion people, 43% of the world population that are unreached. We're talking about people groups where the entire people group has no Christians in them. These are the people groups that it takes more time. Like the ones that can be reached quickly have been. The ones that remain primarily need a deeper investment. Also, in addition to that, a commitment to, yes, like you said, not just bringing them to baptism, not just conversion, but a long discipleship process. We talk about discipleship. In the Jewish system, they would say that a rabbi's job is not done until his disciple becomes a rabbi. So it's not just, Jesus invested 33 and a half years, 3.5 years specifically of ministry. And he did some public evangelism, absolutely, there's nothing wrong with that, but the majority of his time was spent deeply investing in training these 12 men and then guiding them as they started multiplying. Even before he went back to heaven, they were already multiplying. Now, one more thing I want to add to that is a deep commitment to sustainability. Over 30 years now that I've been in missions, I've seen so many mission projects collapse when the missionary or the mission organization pulled out. Sooner or later, there will come a time when the missionary will need to leave, even if that means, they die on the project sometimes. But there will come a time when the missionary is no longer there. If the mission is established in a way that is dependent on foreign leadership and foreign funding, it will collapse when they leave. And so it takes making some hard decisions, but working sustainably within what they are able to do themselves. Mrs. White says that Jesus only did what the disciples themselves, with God's power, were able to do. And so, really, really focusing on sustainability, discipleship that multiplies.
That's such an important thing, and I think that really applies to us here when, we do a public evangelism event or and get somebody coming in, of really spending that time afterwards to truly disciple people. Rather than just baptize, check a number on your thing. Now, one of the things I love the most about the mission field is hearing mission stories.
Oh, yeah.
So I'd love to hear some, you have some mission stories to encourage us home of what the amazing work God is doing abroad?
Yeah, this is one of my absolute favorites. So probably 1 or 2 years after we first arrived there in the Philippines, worked with these tribes, we didn't have a church back then. We were just meeting in our house, and we didn't have any baptized believers at this point. But every Sabbath we would get together in the house and tell Bible stories. And the people, many of them would come out of curiosity to hear these Bible stories, and but they were still trying to figure out, like, who is this God that they're talking about? Is this the same God that we knew? We didn't know this back then, but this is what was going on in their mind. We found out later. Is this the same God that our ancestors told us about? But our ancestors said that God abandoned us, didn't want to have anything to do with us anymore.
So, can I just ask you a quick question on that? I know in the Philippines, a lot of the population is Catholic, because I know when we were there, we saw a lot of Catholic churches. So is that the ancestral background, or is it their own?
No, that's with the lowland Filipinos. With these tribal groups, they're very much animistic, so still spirit worship. They're ruled, they're really enslaved by demons, and they live in constant terror of the demons. Their understanding is because of their original sin, God abandoned them, and they have to deal with these demons now.
Wow.
That's the life.
That just helps me understand what their background was.
So it was during this time that there was a young man by the name of Doming, and he had gotten married just a few months ago, and his wife had just given birth to their first daughter. Now, in the Hmong tribes, the women, when they give birth, they're not allowed to leave the house for 2 months, and they're not allowed to take a shower, they're not allowed to bathe for 2 weeks. So his wife was there in the house, and they were running out of food. And so one morning, when their breakfast was cooked, and Doming got up and was eating. By the way, their staple food there is this poisonous root. It has cyanide in it. And they process it for about 36 hours to get the cyanide out of it.
Ouch.
So that was what what Doming ate for breakfast that morning. And,
Okay.
and as he was eating, his wife said, our food is all gone. I don't know what to do. He said, don't worry about it. I got you covered. I'll take care of you. Newly married, first daughter. He's excited about taking care of his family. So after breakfast, he strapped on his machete and got his basket. They don't carry it on their shoulders. They have the strap that goes over their head, right?
Okay.
And he starts heading up the river, and he goes farther and farther up, and the jungle is starting to close in on the river. And at one point, he just turns off into the jungle. Like you or I wouldn't see a trail there, but just turns off into the jungle, and he heads up the mountain, crosses that mountain, goes down the other side, crosses the river, heads up the second mountain, goes over the top, crosses the second river. The third mountain, then he goes around the face of the ridge on the third one, goes down, crosses the river, goes up the other side. Finally, he's at his mountain farm. They make their farms far away so that the thieves have a harder time stealing their food. And he works all day there. He probably weeds the rice and maybe digs up some sweet potatoes and some sweet potato tops and maybe some cassava, maybe some corn. Anyway, by the time the sun is starting to go down, his basket is full to overflowing. And so he squats down, gets that bark strap over his head, and lifts it up. It's really, really heavy, but he manages. He's still, strong young man, and he starts making his way carefully down that hill to the first creek there. And when he gets there, he sees this huge dry log. He's thinking to himself, if I can get that home, I can chop that up for firewood. With this food, I wouldn't have to leave my wife for a whole week. So even though he already has a really heavy load, he gets that log standing up, he gets it under his shoulder. Man, he's barely able to stand, barely able to stumble along, but he starts up the hill, heading home. And remember that last hill that he came around? He didn't go over the top, he went around the ridge. What he didn't know, right as he was coming around the ridge, there's this huge tree on the uphill side. We're talking virgin rainforest type of trees, right? So like 3 of us holding hands wouldn't be able to reach around this tree.
Wow.
Huge tree. And what he didn't know is that years before, it had been struck by lightning. But it didn't go down the outside like through the bark, where it normally does, so you can see the damage. It had gone down the center. So the tree looked fine on the outside, but on the inside it was dead. And termites had been in there eating the wood. Right as he walks under the tree, the last termite takes the last little bite of wood, and there's a gentle breeze blowing down the mountain, and Doming hears crack, looks up to see this huge tree falling right towards him. He was carrying such a heavy load, he couldn't run. It's just kind of bushwhacking through the jungle anyway. There's not really a trail. He said if he took the time to drop his load, by the time he did that and tried to run, he would have been hit already. And even if he did try to run, like the branches of this tree are as big as normal trees, right? So there's no possible way he can escape. And in that instant, as the tree is falling towards him, he knows that the spirits won't help in a situation like this. The demons, they don't care for people. They don't love people. You have to try to kind of bribe them into helping you. And even then, you're enslaved in the process of trying to use their power. He knew that they would never help. But in that emergency, he remembered. God brought back to mind the stories, the Bible stories that the missionaries, my parents, had been telling him, telling them. And he thought, God's the only one who might be able to help me. I don't know if he really will help, if he still is angry at us, but I'll try. And so he just called out. He said, Father! And as he called on God, the tree stopped. So he said it was like it hit something hard. The whole tree was shaking. I'm sure an angel just reached out and grabbed that tree. It's horizontal, floating right over his head. This huge kind of mother tree type of tree,
Wow.
And he's just standing there, still one hand on the strap, the other on the log, staring at this tree floating over him. And he doesn't know what to do. Like, should I run? But if I run, will this kind of break the spell and the tree will fall? Or if I keep staying here, is it kind of like presuming on God? So as he's debating what to do, the tree starts to move. And it starts to turn. It turns and it turns and it turns. And my hand won't do it, but it turns till the last branch has passed him. And then the angel let go. And the tree crashed back down to the ground again.
Wow.
And I was sitting behind him in church the next Sabbath, when he stood up, we always have a
How old were
testimony
you?
time.
Because it sounds like
I
it's a while
was
ago.
about 9, about
Okay,
9
so
or 10 years old.
so you were just a kid,
Yep.
and this story
Yep.
really impressed you. Wow.
Yeah. And telling the story of how God had saved him. And he started studying with us. And at the very next opportunity, he was baptized. And to this day, you can still go there. If you want to come visit our village, I can take you, introduce you to Domi. And he'll still tell you that God is real, that God loves his people, and that he still will do amazing things to help them.
That's an incredible story.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's really neat. You've kept and God sometimes does that, especially for new believers and kids, I believe. God sometimes does big miracles to just really solidify that.
Well, many people ask me as I tell these kind of stories, this is one of many, many, many stories
Yeah.
like this. People ask me sometimes, why is it that you seem to see so many of these miracles over there? It's not that we don't see miracles here, but it seems more common there.
Yeah.
Many times they say they must have more faith. But it's not like we don't have any faith here. And I can't really say that Doming had really strong faith at this point. He was just kind of trying God.
Well, I think he had no other option, so he just...
Yeah. What I have found to be consistent, though, is that God still works amazing miracles and even still gives dreams and visions in places where the gospel is first entering, in pioneering areas, frontier mission work, in people groups where they have never known God before. And so, if you or anyone in the audience wants to also witness these kinds of things, get involved in frontier missions among the unreached of the world.
That's a beautiful, beautiful story. So, do you have? I'm just gonna. People love mission stories and hearing these. Do you have any other ones that stand out for you?
Sure. Yeah, there was one other story. So I'll move on a little bit. So that was the first generation of church, right?
Okay.
So we talked about multiplication.
Yeah.
In 2 Timothy 2, verse 2, Paul says to Timothy, the things that you've heard from me among many witnesses, commit these to faithful men who will teach others also. So you see 4 generations there, right? So we really look at the generations of growth. Not just numerical growth, but the generational growth there. So a few years after this, as another one of my favorite stories, there are many of them, but one of my favorites is there was a young man from up in the mountains that came down, and he wanted to see what the lowlands was like. He'd heard about radios and canned fish and all these kind of wonders, and so he came down, got a job in the lowlands, and while he's working down there, he's staying with a Hmongian family, and it was in a village where a church had been planted. One of our churches was planted, and every morning they would have a morning worship with him. And he had never seen anything like this, never experienced this kind of thing. They would sing a song, they would read from this black book, and then they would discuss how they would apply this in their lives that day. And then they would pray. And so he started kind of enjoying this every morning before he would go to work in the lowlands. And the very first Sabbath, they said, you can't go to work today. You're staying with us. You have to abide by our rules. And we're going to spend this whole day with God. God asks us to spend the 7th day with him. And so he went to church, and over the next couple of months, he fell in love with God, and he learned to read just a little bit, just kind of memorized the alphabet and could sound out the words. By the time his contract was up, he bought a bunch of gifts for his family, and then headed the about day's trip back up into the mountains again. And when he got up there, his whole family, they were super excited to see him, to meet him again. And his parents grabbed his bag and opened it up and was pulling all of his stuff out because they knew he had brought gifts for them. He went back to work for his family, but every morning he would get out his little Bible, and he could just barely sound it out, but he started in Genesis 1:1 and started reading out loud the Bible stories. Wow. And even just by himself discussing, it's very important, discussing how you're going to actually obey, how you're going to apply this in your life today. Well, his parents thought that was kind of weird at first, but okay, if that's as bad as he learned from the lowlands, that's not too bad. But then the first Sabbath came, and he said, Dad, I'm sorry, but I can't go with you to the mountain farm today to work, because God asks us to spend the whole day with him, the 7th day. Oh boy, dad got angry. He said, hey, this foreign religion, what have they taught you? They taught you to be lazy. They taught you to disrespect your parents, and all this kind of stuff. But his name was Darman. Darman stood firm. He wasn't going to give in. He wasn't going to compromise on what God had asked him to do. And so the father got the whole village together, and the whole village started persecuting him for the next several months. And it was really very, very stressful for him.
How old was he at the time?
I don't know for sure. They don't actually, get birth certificates. They don't have dates. They don't have a calendar up there in the mountains. But he was a young teenager.
Okay.
So maybe, I don't know, 14, 15, something like that.
Okay.
And he actually got so sick from the stress. He got really, really sick and went into a coma, actually. I don't know what happened exactly. We weren't there with him at that time. But, his parents, yes, they were persecuting him, but because they thought he had gone astray, they were trying to bring him back to what they thought was the best. And when he got sick, they wanted to do what they thought was the best for him. So they put him in a hammock, tied it to a pole, caught a little pig, and they headed to the nearest shaman. Well, not the nearest shaman. He was actually in another village, but he was the most powerful shaman in that whole region. So they wanted to take good care of their son. When they got there, they gave him the pig, because shaman never do anything for free. And they asked him, please, will you heal our son? And so he sat down in the hammock and started rocking and pulled a blanket over his head and started chanting to the spirits, trying to call the spirits. And he chanted and chanted and chanted and chanted and chanted. And the parents are starting to wonder, like, what's going on? Normally it only takes a couple of minutes for the shaman to be able to call the spirits, but he keeps on chanting and chanting and chanting. And finally he jumps up and he says, take your son home. I can't do anything for him. And the father said, oh, he's just trying to raise the price. He said, I'm sorry. I know all I have is this baby pig. Oh, but please heal your son and heal our son, and we'll bring another pig later on. I'll bring a bigger pig. But the shaman, he said, no. I was trying to figure out why my spirits, the Komodowan they call them, why the Komodowan weren't coming. And so I opened my eyes in the spirit world and I'm looking around, and all of the Komodowan are lined up outside of the house, but none of them can come in. So I'm trying to figure out, why can't they come in? So still in the spirit world, I'm looking around and I look over at your son lying there. And here's this huge, brilliantly white spirit. He didn't know what an angel was. This huge, brilliantly white spirit standing guard over your son. And as long as he's there, none of my spirits can come in. So you might as well take him home. I can't do anything for him.
Wow.
So they loaded him up in their hammock again and caught the pig again, because of course the shaman couldn't heal him. So
Take their money back.
Yeah, take their money back. Headed home again, and as they're walking, the father's thinking, and when they get to the hut, he tells his wife, we've been persecuting our son. We've been giving him such a hard time, but it's clear that the spirit of his God is way more powerful than even the most powerful spirits here. And really, our spirits, they don't treat us good. And our son has been so kind, so respectful, such a good kid since he's come home. And it's clear that his God is more powerful. Why don't we just let him worship his God? And his wife said, yeah, finally you figured it out.
Wow.
And so once they agreed.
So his wife was already on board, kind of
she was
thinking
already on board. But once they made that agreement, within just a couple of minutes, Dharman woke up, and he recovered so quickly that the next morning he was able to go back to work with his father again in their mountain farm. And because of his faithful witness, there in that village, the village of Parsikayan, there is now a second generation church.
Incredible.
Yeah, and then again, that just the same things keep happening over and over again. So the second generation went on and now have planted third generation and fourth generation churches. And to this day, we still see miracles like this. In the fourth generation church, I won't tell the whole story, but there was a brand new leader that the missionary, the native missionary, had to leave him, had to move on to other churches, and kind of like Paul would visit back again. And his son was stillborn. And all night long, they were so sad. All night long, they're sitting there outside of their house, just mourning with the whole village. More than 100 people passed through the house and checked on the baby. And he was dead. He told me he was as cold as the rocks in the river.
Oh my.
But when morning came up and the sun started coming up, and the elder said, it's time to bury your son, he kind of woke up from his stupor and knelt down there in front of the whole village, poured out his heart to God, and begged God, please bring my son back to life again. Kind of the innocent prayer. You don't know any better than to ask God for something like that. And the whole village thought he was kind of crazy, but he jumped up, ran back up into his hut, and reached down. His baby still wasn't breathing, but he reached down and touched him, and his baby was back to normal temperature again. So he picks him up, and he's like desperate. What do I do? What do I do? He's panicking because he thinks God brought my son back to life again, but he's not breathing, and there's no one there. He's not a midwife. He doesn't know what to do. He's running back and forth in the house, but he remembers that the midwives will kind of give the baby a little slap when they're born to get him breathing again. So as he's carrying him, he gives him a good whack on the back, and his son just starts screaming. And he says it was the most beautiful thing he'd ever heard when his son started crying like that. God brought his son back to life again.
Incredible.
Yeah, and just story after story after story like this.
Of miracles.
Of miracles, yeah.
That's just beautiful. I had a curiosity question. You said when you first came there, they had no technology. It was aluminum pans. Was about
And
the
machetes.
And machetes was the extent of their technology. How has that changed over the 30 years?
Yeah, along the border area, they're quite a bit more developed right now. Many of them have been able to go to school, which is still a challenge because there's a lot of prejudice. Still, they're still treated quite badly.
So within the Philippine community,
Yes,
because
yes.
they're more from the country, if you will, rural, rugged.
Many people actually believe that they're not fully human, that they're like halfway between monkeys and people, and even unfortunately, even in the church, there's quite a bit of prejudice still against them. So they are doing their best to get an education as they're allowed to, when they're allowed to come into the schools and whatnot.
Who would not allow them?
The lowland school system.
Because of the prejudice built into their system.
Right.
But can I ask you, on the outside, if you look at them, do they all look the same?
Yes, I mean I can tell their facial features that are different.
Okay, so they are different facial features.
Yeah,
slightly.
yeah, somewhat.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I was just
Yeah.
curious on the outside if you could
Sure,
tell.
sure. So they have, a number of them on the border areas have education now. They're starting to be able to get like tin roofs, so they don't have to replace the grass roof every year or two. They have, some of the villages have electricity now. They can't really afford it, especially getting it hooked up, but when elections come around, they ask the politicians to help them. So a lot of times they'll get one connection for the whole village and everybody will just kind of plug extension cords in. So there's some development. They're starting to plant more vegetables to have more cash crops and better nutrition as well. But the really, for me, one of the coolest developments that has happened is we had this baby that was born right when we arrived, 1994. And he was born into the Stone Age, right? But he got good nutrition as a kid. Sadly, malnutrition, as infants really caused a lot of problems. There was a baby boom. There was 50% infant mortality when we came.
Whoa.
And so
that's one of the questions I was going to ask you. Maybe you can answer that. How have the Seventh-day Adventists working with these people changed their outcomes?
That is
go ahead.
one of the big things.
Yeah.
So my mom, because of the prejudice, they weren't receiving health care. So my mom became the primary health care provider for
Is your mom a nurse or anything like that?
Yeah, she's kind of a nurse plus,
Okay.
with extra training. And we have special permission from the Department of Health to work just with these people specifically.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's like even legal, like whatever licensing they've approved her.
Yes, it is legal. Yeah.
Okay.
So she was the primary healthcare provider for this tribe of 20,000 people.
Wow.
But we always were very careful to only provide medical care that we could train them to do. So we were able to train them they have their own healthcare, native healthcare workers now. So even after we were no longer there, the death rate did not go back up again. They still have been able to maintain their health.
So what did the infant mortality rate go to?
I don't know exactly, but it's low. It's I don't know, like maybe 3% or less. Yeah, it's very low. So there's a baby boom. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this boy was born into that, but he got good nutrition. He arrived just as we came, and he was able to go to school, and he loved school. He was very, very good at it, and even though he was not treated well, even though he was by grades at the top of the class, he was always put at the bottom of the class, these kinds of things, but he endured that. And when he got to college was about the time that we went into phase out. I moved to the Office of Philippine Frontier Missions, which is right next to the university, the Adventist University.
In Manila? Or?
In Cavite, so it's just south of Manila.
Okay.
They have an incredible work-study program there. So we brought him there, and he lived with us, along with a bunch of students. We actually we're operating a dorm for native students who are working students on campus. So they work their way through college. He worked his way through, got a degree in biology, and is now the very first Hmongin medical student. He's in his second year of medical school.
So this is the very first in this tribe of 20,000 people.
Yes.
It's going to be a doctor.
Well,
and
this is just one of 8 tribes. There's more than 100,000 of these native tribes on the island. So starting in the Stone Age and now in medical school. It's just an incredible story of how with God, the development just takes off by leaps and bounds.
And really this started with, it's amazing how God sometimes chooses humans, us flawed, imperfect humans, but he's really to change life for 100,000 people, sounds like.
Yes, absolutely.
Incredible. So what keeps you in the mission field? Tell me what how that works for you.
Two things, a positive and a negative. The negative is, even as a kid, when I was 9 years old, I got really depressed. I started thinking, what's the purpose of life? Seems like we just kind of eat in order to be able to work, in order to be able to eat, in order to be able to work.
Because it's not a luxury life being a missionary.
Yeah. So the little bit of joy we get out of life is not worth the suffering of it. So I got really depressed, and it wasn't until years later that I knew God here, I knew about God, but when I actually met God, that I finally found purpose. Like there's a heaven to gain and a hell to shun, and while we're here, there's a work to accomplish.
Yes.
There's a reason why we're still here, and that is to bring Christ, to bring this hope to other people. So that's the negative side. I couldn't just go back to just earning a living for myself. I think I would go crazy. It's a hard life. Missions is a hard life, physically, but there's so much fulfillment and peace in it, and what you're doing will last forever.
Amen.
But then the positive side, what I love to see is not just seeing people come to Christ, but even more, like a parent seeing your child, not just providing for your child, but seeing your child now implementing the things and training other people. When I see them taking over my work and doing it better than I ever did it, and seeing the multiplication and the growth, and not just lives changing that I was able to touch, but them now multiplying that through thousands and thousands of people, that's just so fulfilling to me.
Are your parents still alive?
They are. Because of their health, they're not able to be overseas anymore, but they're still supporting the work.
So they got to see this to the fourth and fifth generation.
Yes.
What a beautiful thing. So how can people, if people listen to this and they're moved, how can they, number one, support you, support the Philippine missions, and get involved? And what advice do you have for people that, their heart's burning to experience stories like you're sharing?
Absolutely. So we always talk about the GPS of missions. Go, pray, support.
Okay.
If you're called to go, only 0.1% of Christians, of active Christians, actually work for the unreached. Most of the mission work that is being done is in areas that are already reached, or they at least have access to the gospel. So I would ask you to prayerfully consider the unreached. 43% of the world is unreached, and yet very little of our work actually goes with that particular demographic.
And most of our tithe dollars kind of stays here, so.
Statistically, less than 20%, about 20% of 1 penny out of every dollar actually goes into missions for the unreached. So $1 given to missions, less than 1 penny of that actually goes to work for unreached people, groups specifically. So I would ask you to prayerfully consider going to those people, going to the unreached specifically, especially if God's calling you. Don't fear. Satan will put up seemingly impossible barriers if you try to go there, but keep on pushing through. You'll find them melt away as you keep on going. The second is, Jesus says, pray the Lord of the harvest to send forth more laborers. But Mrs. White tells us, as we do that, we need to work to fulfill those prayers. So, be involved in yourself. Don't just pray about it, but get involved personally. But she also tells a story in Testimonies Volume 6 of a young man who intended to go into missions in China. And his father died. He was forced to take over the family business, couldn't go overseas. But years later, he told a friend, I still work for the Lord 24/7. And his friend said, well, how's that possible? And he said, well, in my business, I'm always talking about Christ, and people who are interested, I will study with them. And I've led people to Christ here in America through my business. But while I'm sleeping, I'm financially supporting a missionary that works in such and such a province in China. So between the two of us, we work for the Lord 24/7.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, and so she endorses that and says, why won't more Adventists do that? So not everyone is called to go to the ends of the earth. We understand that. But we can partner together. You can financially support those who are able to go as you are working to make disciples here in your local area.
I love it. And the website specifically for the Philippine missions.
Yeah, our website, you can donate through our website. It is PFM Missions. That's just one M though. So PFMISSIONS.org.
Okay, so pfmissions.org. And then you also are partnered with AFM.
Correct.
So if somebody wants to, because you said that's more for long term, you guys have kind of short term opportunities if people want to serve?
Yes, our missionaries that are based in the Philippines are long term, and then we bring in, if people want to do like a medical mission trip or a construction like that, people can come in to support the work that is going on the long term discipleship going on there. Yes.
Amen. Well, John, thank you so much for the work and for encouraging us. And if I'm not mistaken, I think when you look at church growth, when it kind of plateaued in North America, I think was when people stopped supporting missions. So
Yes.
on my heart, I think it's so important that we do
Yes.
support these foreign missionaries. You guys are out there, again, giving up what could be a very comfortable life in America to really kind of live rurally. And I'm sure your work is not always appreciated, so I'm sure you go through all kinds of challenges, but the reward is just immense, sounds
Amen.
like.
Amen.
Amen. Well, thank you. We want to support you. We'll put the link to this if people want to support. And thank you for making this one of your stops here as you're here in America, kind of sharing what God is doing in the Philippines.
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity to share.
Amen.